It's time for the Volquest Podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday morning, everybody, and welcome into the Volquest Podcast here at Volquest.com. And it's presented by each and every week, Smokey Mountain Organics. If you're suffering from those spring allergies like many of us are, then you need to check out Smokey Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store, focusing on natural products and organic remedies to a variety of ailments. You can visit one of the three locations located right here in East Tennessee, including the location in Knoxville at 8018 Kingston Pike, across the street from the Trader Joe's, or you can buy online, shop online at SmokeyMountainOrganics.com. I'm Eric Cain alongside Rob Lewis, Austin Price, and Brent Hubbs. Got a couple things we're going to get into today. Of course, baseball, that's the hot topic right now. Falling to Notre Dame in super regional play at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. Coming up short of Omaha, we'll touch on that. And, of course, a big recruiting weekend. Had 3 official visitors that were in town. There's been a couple of camps over the week, so loads to get into, guys. But let's start with baseball. Brent, obviously, it's disappointing is the way I'd characterize it. This team had the talent to not only go to Omaha, but win some games in Omaha. And anytime you come up short of that goal, it's going to be disappointing. But especially with the late rally there Sunday afternoon, Notre Dame just never gave up and ultimately came out victorious there on a Sunday in Game 3.
Well, there's a lot to get to and to dive into. I'll say this. Whenever you're in the championship arena or in the championship hunt, there's going to be more disappointment than there's going to be jubilation because more teams lose than win championships. We talked about it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. I think it's harder to get to Omaha maybe than it is to any other sport. You know, I think it's probably harder to get to Omaha than it is a Final Four. Now, it may be harder to win a basketball championship. That's up for debate. But I think the path to getting to Omaha is one that's really, really challenging because it's not just one game like, Rob, when you're in the Sweet 16, you get a guy hot for that one game for 40 minutes and you find a way to be Cinderella. You got to win 2 out of 3. And when you're playing a best-of-3 series, you know, cream rises to the top, and you've got to play well. You can't just have one great afternoon or one great night, and that's obviously Tennessee did not have enough. They picked a bad weekend not to play their best baseball. Their 2 bad weekends came against Kentucky and Notre Dame, and as a result, Tennessee's season ends prematurely. It was a great run, but I think everybody's going to remember for a long time that this team failed to get to the College World Series, which I think everybody, quite frankly, assumed they were going to. Maybe they shouldn't have, but they assumed that was going to happen.
Yeah, for me, I've told, I know Eric and Ben and I've had this conversation, maybe you and I have too, Hubbs. I never thought that this was a championship or bust season. Like, I think had they wanted it, it would have been awesome. I think the biggest thing was getting back. And I think that's where it's disappointing is, you know, I think it would probably been a little bit disappointing to get there and go 2 and done because that's the same thing you did a year ago. I think they need to win a game. But had they just got there and won one game and then lost the next 2, I would have called the season still very successful. It's just hard to look at this run as anything but a disappointment when you don't make it to Omaha. You know, I mean, what they did was unbelievable. You know, but at the end of the day, it's a postseason sport. Ole Miss had a losing record in SEC play, was up in the air whether they would even get in the NCAA tournament, and yet here they are going to Omaha. I mean, you know, look at the teams going to Omaha. I mean, like that's the kick in the butt if you're Tennessee. You know, I mean, Auburn, A&M, you know, Texas, all teams that you faced except for A&M that you know are there and you're not.
Well, and I think it also tells you how hard it is to get there, Eric. I mean, look at the home teams that didn't advance out of their super regional. Look at the teams that are going to Omaha that were not quote seeded. They were not one of the top 8 seeds. It's hard to get there, but yeah, it's disappointing that this team, which has been Rob so dominant, and called the best team, one of the best teams in college baseball history, and one of the best teams in the decade, deepest pitching rotation. Best offense out there, that they couldn't find a way to win 2 out of 3 against Notre Dame at home in a super regional to advance to the College World Series.
Yeah, and I thought, Hubbard, you brought up the pitching, and to me that was my biggest surprise of the weekend. I mean, I didn't follow Notre Dame closely all year, but just reading about them in the run up to the weekend, it seemed like Tennessee had a big advantage in not just the starting pitching, but the bullpen. And boy, that did not work out this weekend. I mean, I know Tennessee's bats were, I don't know, not exactly ice cold, but they weren't clutch. They didn't get a lot of guys on base to take advantage of the long ball on Friday night. I guess all those were solo shots, right? If I remember correctly.
Yep.
All the bombs, and then Notre Dame's bullpen this weekend. I kind of thought was a story.
Yeah, and then of course the big story Sunday for Tennessee was the great debate on should you have left Chase Burns in as long as you did. Now, whether you bring him back out there for the 7th, like I think a lot of us agree that was probably the right call because he was cruising. But I think we can all agree that you needed to have two guys, at least one guy ready to roll. And Tony Vitello post game, emotional about the loss, obviously, emotional about, these seniors and being their final time together, but also credits Notre Dame just on that and how he maybe mismanaged some situations. And it took a little ownership after the game. Here's Tony Vitello post game comments on that 7th inning, leaving Chase Burns in and the loss overall.
Obviously, congratulations to Notre Dame. I'd say they have a lot to do with what I'm at fault for as far as decision making, and the job of a coach is once the game starts, put your guys in a good position to succeed. And I didn't do that. But this is a job that requires big boy decisions, and they come at high stakes when you play in our league or you get into the postseason. A lot of that was discomfort from things we saw out of Notre Dame. So, again, a credit to them. And then, two, you got to execute. So they did that throughout the weekend. I thought our guys played good defense. And, obviously, we kind of did some damage yesterday on the scoreboard. But that'll stick with me. Notre Dame will get to go to Omaha and enjoy that and probably do some damage. It's a really tough group. And I think what needs to stick with our guys once time passes, which they say time heals all wounds. I don't know who they are, because sometimes those take a long time. But 57, that's a lot. That's a lot. A team that bunch of good kids, a couple maniacs out there, but accused of bats. I've never seen a kid accused of doctoring a ball, accused of doing the Astros and banging on the bench. There's other. Accused of signaling 3-3, and that's supposed to be the double bird. A lot of that stuff was just, because of how dynamic they were as a group and what they accomplished. And they did some extraordinary things. And really it was just kind of like yesterday. You slide Trey Lipscomb into the 4-hole, Drew Gilbert's out, and gets an RBI in the first inning. That obviously is not the most important play of the weekend, but it's one, to me, that defines this group of a bunch of guys that got each other's back.
Brent, you hear it there from Tony Vitello, says that maybe, Notre Dame has a lot to do with how he decided to go about that game, late situations in the bullpen. If you were Tony, how would you have handled that 7th inning? Because Tennessee, of course, had a 3-1 lead. Burns had a 1-2-3 inning in the 6th, just got an out there on the top of the 7th. What would you have done in terms of handling Chase Burns in that situation?
Well, I would have had somebody hot and ready in the bullpen. And I think this is where Tony Vitello missed Frank Anderson this weekend. And Frank Anderson is a terrific baseball coach who's done this for a long time. And there's a lot of talk about Drew Gilbert and what he should have done and how he should have acted and everything else. If they got to put a seatbelt on him, Frank Anderson's got to stay on a bucket in the dugout. But because here's the thing, Tony Vitello knows his baseball team. He knows his baseball team well. He's managing an entire game. He's managing batting rotation, managing all of those things that's going on. Frank Anderson, he completely turns the pitching staff over to. So what kind of conversations, Austin, would Frank Anderson be having with Chase Burns? And more importantly, or just as importantly, would he be having with Evan Russell in the 5th and the 6th inning on, hey, is the fastball still moving the way it needs to? Is the slider, where's the slider cutting at? Is it getting deep in on the batter? Is it cutting early? Is he hanging some pitches? What's the movement on things right now? I don't think you had that level of conversation because the guy who's developing Chase Burns is not in your dugout because he could not keep his cool on Friday night and stay in the dugout to avoid a 3-game suspension. I just thought they missed Frank Anderson on Sunday afternoon, and that was a real mistake by a veteran coach to not keep his composure Friday night.
Yeah, and I know what Tony tried to say he was trying to come and make sure that Drew didn't go nuclear, but I mean, come on, man. He came out of that dugout like I've said it all weekend. He came out there like George Brett on the Pine Tar game. I mean, like it wasn't like he just came out there all calm to Drew, and he wasn't clearly only talking to Drew. They missed that. And when do you take him out? Anybody that said they should have not sent him out there, it doesn't know baseball. I mean, he had 73 pitches. He'd given up 2 hits. Gets the first out, ground rule double. Do you take him out then? Maybe. I mean, maybe. But at that point, if you do that, you're about to face Notre Dame's best hitter, who has just torched you all weekend. They get him to pop it up. Now there's 2 outs. Like, I think if he was going to take him out, he should have taken him out after the 2-run homer. Because the next guy had the home run foul and then subsequently hit the home run to give him the lead 4-3. But he really hit 2 home runs as far as distance-wise off of Burns in that at bat. I thought if they were going to take him out, they should have taken him out after the 2-run homer that tied the game, not before then. I mean, he had shown you nothing to warrant taking him out before then. He'd given up 3 hits before the 2-run homer, 3 hits. And one of them was that, infield hit that ended up turning into Notre Dame's first run, which, I mean, that's not a hard hit ball at all early in the game by, again, the kid that was Notre Dame's best hitter.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you still had guys on base earlier in that ball game that you failed to bring in. Tennessee left 5 on. And, it's just like a football game. You can pick and choose, whichever series, whichever play that could have had the difference in a ball game. But, when you have a 3-1 lead late in the ball game, and I think we all felt good about Tennessee at that point in the game, but knowing that it wasn't over, you just have to be ready for each and every scenario. And that's where I come in with Brent. I do think Tennessee missed a Frank Anderson in that situation.
Through the first 4 innings on Saturday, you're sitting there at 1-0. And I was watching on my phone and playing golf in Middle Tennessee. And I just kept telling the guys I was playing golf with, I'm like, they've got to extend. Cause this is one of those games where, like, even if you have a good pitcher's duel, a couple of hits, put together, and all of a sudden you're down a run, know. And so they were able to have that big inning. They pull away, they run away from them in that game. Tennessee couldn't do that. When they went up 3-1 off the Seth Stevenson double, and he's sitting there with no outs at second base, not getting him in, to me, was crushing. I thought that was a real blown opportunity.
Yeah, here's the only thing about the pitch count that I would have, and again, I think this is where Frank Anderson not being there is a factor. 92 pitches is what Burns finished with, if I'm looking at the stats right. I may have this wrong. I don't think I do. That's the most he had thrown since April the 29th. He had pitched a month where he had not thrown a whole lot of pitches. He had one game where he had 80 pitches in May, but everything else had been 29, 67, 63. I mean, where's his number at? Where should his number have been? I know he was cruising, but the only thing I wonder is he had not been extended. It was 90 degrees. He had not been extended very long for about 6 weeks. That's why I was surprised that they just didn't have somebody up in the bullpen to start the 7th. Because I thought when he went back out for the 7th, I'd have brought him back out there because he cruised into 6th. But I thought maybe if he kept cruising, they would ride it. But it was one of those deals. If there was the first sign of any trouble, then you're going to come get him. But they couldn't come get him after the ground rule double because they didn't have anybody in the bullpen hot and ready. And that was the biggest surprise to me. I think if you'd have gone into that game, Robin, you just said you're going to get 5 out of Chase Burns, and you're going to turn it over to a bullpen that you hadn't used all weekend, other than Ben Joyce out of the pen, basically. I think Tony Vitello would have said, hey, I'll take 5 in a lead from Chase Burns. That means he's done what he's given to him. So to me, they were in the gravy zone at that point. He had his fresh bullpen. I'm just surprised he didn't have somebody up and ready at the first moment's notice of trouble. That was my biggest surprise. Not necessarily when you go get him. He didn't have an option to go get him, but because he didn't have anybody hot and ready until the game was tied.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add to you. I mean, I echo what you and Austin both said. You don't take that guy out in the 7th to start the 7th, based on the way he pitched the 6th. But yeah, to not have somebody up and ready to go, and then just overall, the bullpen. I mean, to me, that's Tennessee smashed the ball last year. I mean, they had a lot of guys that had great years at the plate, but and to me, and I'm hardly the only person with this opinion, the biggest difference was just the abundance of arms they had in the bullpen this year. And for that, for something that's been an advantage all year long to not come through on the biggest stage with everything on the line, that was my biggest surprise this weekend.
And even AP and I, before first pitch on Sunday, we were talking, if they wanted to go, 2 innings, and just keep mixing it up for Notre Dame. I mean, you had the luxury of doing that because, again, Tennessee had a full stocked bullpen. I mean, you had Beam that could go out there and give you something.
Well, we were talking, but you and I were talking about Notre Dame doing that to Tennessee, though.
I know, but I'm saying the options you had galore. I mean, you started Chase Burns, and I would agree, 4 or 5 innings, and then turn to the bullpen. But if you wanted to do that, keep mixing it up. I mean, you had the point of the matter is, and again, everybody makes mistakes. It is what it is. But for someone to not be ready and hot in the bullpen at that point in time in the 7th is kind of the disappointing thing.
Let me say this: credit to Notre Dame lefty that came in the 5th. Okay, I mean, that because Notre Dame that they, their coach, they had a quick hook. They were going to try to piecemeal it together. Tennessee had a chance in the 5th to blow that thing open, and really distance themselves. They brought the left-hander in, and he kept Tennessee at bay, and he deserves a ton of credit for taking a high-octane offense that felt like it was sitting on the launching pad in the 5th inning. I mean, you kind of felt like this was going to be the Saturday deal. Maybe they weren't going to hit 3 home runs or 4 home runs in the inning, but you felt like they were getting ready to score right there, and he comes in and slams the door in the 5th and slammed the door to the finish line. So give the left-hander from Notre Dame a lot of credit because he was clutch when they had to have somebody to silence what's arguably one of the most potent offenses in college baseball history.
He was, and maybe you weren't going to bat around and have 2 guys or 1 guy hit 2 home runs in the same inning, but you felt good about where you were. Before we flip the script here and talk recruiting, we kind of heard from Brent, we've heard from AP, and y'all can add on to it as much as you want. But Rob, when you look back at this team 5-10 years down the line, the word that comes to me was the thoughts for me will be fun, great team, disappointing though, because of course you fell short of going to Omaha. I don't consider this a failure of a season. That word's been thrown out a lot here lately, but I would say disappointing, obviously. How would you kind of view this season in the review mirror, a couple years down the line?
Eric, I think you have to say it's disappointing just because of how good they were. And I don't mean it's a failure or, anything like that, but they very clearly were the best team in college baseball all year long. I mean, maybe by a pretty wide margin. Again, I don't follow at the molecular level like you do, Eric, but I mean, it seemed to me like Tennessee, there was a pretty big gap in between Tennessee and whoever else you would throw in there. And so to not end that season in Omaha, and I'm with AP, it's not win it or bust, but to not finish in Omaha, I think that's, you came up short. But on the flip side of that, how much fun did fans have for the last 3 months?
Yeah, it was a blast. I mean, that's
my biggest takeaway is how much enjoyment this fan base got from this team for the last 3 months. I mean, they rode a wave and they loved it. And it was like nothing I thought I would ever see when you're talking about Tennessee baseball.
Fun team to watch for sure. And now you're going to flip the script. Of course, the transfer portal, Tennessee's already active in there and will continue to be active. And, I think Tennessee's going to be in a spot to where it can, try to pick up right where it left off next year. Elsewhere away from Lindsey Nelson Stadium, Tennessee did have a pretty decent little recruiting weekend. You had 3 official visitors in town. You had a big camp on Sunday. Austin Price, Aiden Mazzell, the wide receiver, Jalen Smith, the linebacker, Malik Benson, the junior college wide receiver, all in on official visits. Sounded like they did pretty well with all those guys. Aiden Mazzell, I still believe Florida would be the leader there, but had a lot of good things to say to Tennessee. He told me Sunday morning when leaving that's, if you could have co-favorites right now, it might be Florida and it might be Tennessee, but we'll see how that goes. But I think Jalen Smith really vibe with Tennessee. And I think Malik Benson, as he told you, Tennessee's the new favorite there.
Yeah, I think Jalen Smith's going to come to a decision sometime probably late June, early July. Love where Tennessee's at there. And then Malik Benson, Tennessee's the leader. He named him that when he left campus. Can Tennessee, hang on with the Alabama-Georgia visits pending? Now, I do think where this helps Tennessee is that those visits, Hubs, are back-to-back. So the family and the kid are about to go on like 5 days of straight, boom, 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 go to a new campus, boom, boom, boom. And so, like, I think that's not a bad thing because you can almost be overwhelmed by all the stuff they will throw at you in those 2 visits being back to back. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can get a little mundane. You kind of just
Wait for it to
tune
be
out.
over.
Yeah, because you sort of see the same thing, you hear the same messaging. I think there's a real challenge this day, and this is a bigger picture, AP, but I think there's a real challenge this day from recruiting staffs, from coaching staffs to recruiting offices on when kids should visit. It used to be, you think about Florida State for years. They had that, they always took the last weekend in January, right? You bring in 20, 25 kids the last weekend in January.
Last visit wins, Hubbard.
Everybody's talking about Florida State, Bobby Bowden, boy, they're struggling in recruiting, and all of a sudden they close with 10, and that's how they built it. Tennessee built theirs around the Martin Luther King holiday weekend. They would kind of tandem visits there. You kind of had a strategy. Now with so many kids taking visits 5-6 months before they sign anything, I think you have a real different. You have to have a real different strategy, a different kind of strategy. What works, and I think it's more, instead of a blanket strategy, maybe it's more tailor made to the individual than it's ever been before. Because how do you keep the newness to something if they're visiting the middle of June and you sign in December? It's hard to do.
Okay, perfect example. Jakeem Jackson. I think Tennessee's in a good spot there. He's going to visit officially at the end of the month, but he's not going to official Miami and Florida until the season, and then he will commit October 22nd. So you're trying to hold on to that. Let's say you have a lot of momentum coming out of your official visit. He's loving Tennessee. He's basically told the staff, "Hey, I'm coming, right? Let's play this narrative out there." That's a long time to hold that momentum and withstand official visits. Now, I'm not worried about the atmosphere at Miami. I mean, that's like going to a game at Maryville College. But the atmosphere at Florida, depending on who they play, could be really good, right? And especially with the game time. So, like, how do you keep that momentum for that amount of time? So, like, if I was Tennessee, I'd be like, Jakeem, any chance you can come up here unofficially and do your official for a game in the fall? Like that, but you got to take what you can get. Like, all kids that aren't made of money, they can't just roll in town anytime, especially kids from that far away. So, it just kind of is what it is. But you're right. I mean, it's even like saying, hey, let's look back. Like Tennessee's backloaded these officials at the last weekend in June, right? Like some kids are going to not even make it to the visit. I don't think. Like CJ Allen, I think he's going to be off the board before he ever has a chance to visit Tennessee, which would have been that weekend.
Which makes I just think it's hard, Rob. I mean, I just think it's. I mean, you sit in there and you can.
If a kid ain't coming in the summer, Hubbard, I'm not visiting him.
Yeah, and you're just. But then you're sitting there going, well, I mean, I want to make sure we get a visit, and you can talk yourself into a million different answers on when's the right time, but it's not as blanket as it used to be because it's not all crammed into that 1 month right before signing day. Because now you're trying to hold on, and I think holding on's always been harder in a lot of cases than it is getting somebody, Rob.
Yeah, I agree with AP. I mean, if you don't have hard intel that says this kid wants to make a decision in the summer, then I think it's tough to use, especially when you don't have an infinite number of them. I mean, you have a finite number. I mean, you don't have to sign every kid that you bring on an official visit, but you've got to have a pretty solid batting average, for sure. And that's. I totally get what you're saying, Hubbard. I mean, you want to make sure that you get the kid on your campus, but man, I mean, if it's a scenario where he's visiting in June and he's pretty much told you he's not committing until October or after his senior season is over, then that kind of feels like you're wasting one.
Well, I think with kids out of the portal, Rob, in all sports, basketball, football, like you better get them early. Like trying to say, well, we want to be the last visit. I mean, yes, that might play out that way, but too many kids I've seen have said, yeah, I'm going to go visit these 4 schools. They go visit 1, maybe 2, and they're done. They don't ever get to schools 3 and 4. And we're talking about portal kids.
Well, and I think portal kids are a little bit different too because they've been through the process once before. So they don't have, their whole thought process in deciding on a school, for the most part, for portal kids, it's different than it is when you're a high school kid. Maybe y'all disagree, Rob. You may totally disagree with that, but I don't think they're as consumed with how good the food is at the dinner that they go to, or how good the academic presentation is. They want to know what the roster looks like, where do they play, and they do want to get it done. They're not interested in dragging something out, which is why I don't know that you want to be necessarily the last one in the portal deal, because maybe a guy's not going to take all 5 of his visits because he's like, I don't
and if they
want to
are about all
again.
that, you probably don't want them, right? They're a little too drama.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think portal kids they're leaving someplace for a reason, and they know what they're looking for. Exactly. I mean, they're just so much more well informed than a high school kid would be, as you'd expect. I mean, from the experience.
AP, there's quite a few official visitors coming in the next 2 weekends in June. There were a couple that were planned to come in this past weekend, but had to postpone. Who were any updates on when those guys will be in, either this upcoming weekend or later in June, or
Colby Young?
Together?
Colby Young, the smallish tight end, big wide receiver, however you want to describe him, from Lackawanna, JUCO in Pennsylvania. He's going to come in this weekend. Okay. As for the linebacker from Florida, I think that may be the end of the month. If not, it'll be pushed to the season. I just know he was trying to take care of some stuff off the field, which was, I think, one of those reasons why he pushed it back. And then, to me, all eyes to me this weekend are on 2 guys: offensive tackle, Stan Rammel, and then Mr. Do Everything, Cam Seldon. Yeah, but there are other guys coming in this weekend that are good players. I'm just saying, like, when I look at this, like this is a big weekend for Tennessee with Cam Seldon. To me, Tennessee's got to have a ton of momentum coming out this weekend with Cam Seldon if they're going to land him. And if they do, I think they have a really good shot to land him. So big weekend. Seldon, gives you a lot of options because he can, do wide receiver or running back or both. Maybe at the same time, maybe he'll even play quarterback and throw the ball to himself. You never know. You never know. But
he's Bugs Bunny, right field Bugs Bunny.
As Nico told me, he is a grown man. I mean, he's 6'2", he's 220 pounds.
He can fly.
And he's the state track champ in the state of Virginia. Like, when you see him, there's nothing about him that screams not developed. I mean, he's fully developed. I mean, he's a big kid and can run.
And they want him anyway. They want him regardless, obviously. They
want
prospect,
I mean,
but like AP, I mean, it helps so much too, because there's so many questions about running back right now. If you get Cam Seldon in the boat, that helps, because again, options to where if you strike out on a couple guys that you want, obviously, or you only bring in one, you have Cam Seldon that can obviously play that if needed, and might play both of them to begin with.
Okay, let's say Tennessee lands Nathan Laycock. Let's say they get Malik Benson done and Carnell Tate. Let's just, and they may not get any of those kids, but I'm just saying, let's play devil's advocate here. All of a sudden, Cam Seldon's that toy is kind of like that fourth receiver, who plays running back too. Or if they don't land a couple of those guys, Cam Seldon can be one of those featured guys at receiver. I mean, again, he just gives you options, and options are a good thing in recruiting most of the time.
And then the question is, if you're able to get a guy like that, where is he going to play? Those questions, and let's see if they can actually develop into one position, because there've been many players here in years past to where they don't necessarily have a home. But I think that guy would be too talented to leave off the field once he's developed and he were to get here. Last thing, guys, there's 2 camps, or really 3 camps if you want to count it that way. There was a big man camp on campus. There was a 7-on-7 over at the intramural fields. That was all on Thursday or Wednesday of last week. And then there was a prospect camp on Sunday. A lot of walk-ups, but a lot of talented athletes on campus. Brent, one that comes to mind, Tayden Hobbs, a guy that Rodney Gardner likes an awful lot. Of 2023, picked up an offer, and he was one of the few that got an offer on Sunday.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's picked up offers everywhere he's been. Interesting kid, really good athlete. For his size, I think he ran sub 4.8 in the 40, both at Tennessee and at Alabama. Got an offer from both schools. I think he's a guy, athletically looks really good. Probably would like to see a little more production when you watch game film. But athletically, you cannot deny what he can do. Basketball guy, comes from a basketball family. His dad was a college basketball player. He's got 2 sisters that are younger than him. I think one's going to be a junior, one's going to be a freshman. Both of them were in town this weekend for Lady Vol basketball camp on Sunday. and both of them are national type recruits. The oldest one has got South Carolina and UConn as potential official visits. I mean, she's way up on Kelly Harper's board as well. So a talented family. And Hobbs is a guy whose athletic ability continues to shine in every camp setting that he's a part of. I think the question now is, can Tennessee get an official visit, AP? I think they made a good impression, but after that visit and the camp wears off here over the next few days, can Tennessee hang around and get one of those official visits in the fall? Because he will spend July playing AAU basketball. Of course, it's a dead period for recruiting for football. And then the question is, can you get one of his 5 official visits? He's probably already got a couple locked up anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, he said that, he would be leaning to doing that. But I mean, again, you're right. I mean, look at Isaiah Shirley. Came in town, says all the right things, and then right now doesn't feel like Tennessee has any traction with him at all. So what same, does that feel like that a week from now with Hobbs? Or does, he go back and go, man, I really liked it. I definitely want to take an OB there in the fall. He's in no rush. That's a good thing, if you're Tennessee, because, you're offering at this stage, you want a little extra time to play a little bit of catch up. So, yeah, I mean, 100%. The real question, Hubbs, is he kin to Brent Hubbs? I mean, like, that was the question on the board. and I mean, like, I couldn't answer it. I'm not part of that family tree.
No, I don't think there's any relation there. Tennessee with a couple of other offers as well, offering class of 26 defensive lineman Deuce Gerald's.
Units.
Down in Georgia, friends with Tyler Atkinson, who is maybe the best looking rising freshman high school player I've seen in a long time, Rob Lewis. He's different now.
I mean, 2 kids that were just ridiculous athletically. He and Deuce, and also super young man. I mean, me and Eric both spent some time talking to him after the fact, and a lot more mature than I was before I had a driver's license. But,
and then they offered Marcus Gorey out of Bradley Central, who's a 2020,
and he's 2026, right, or 2024.
Gorey's 2024, yeah.
So that's a little more immediate. But yeah, the 2 Georgia kids, Gardner and Atkinson, you're going to be hearing a lot about them.
So there's been 5 camps in the rearview mirror, 1 more to go on the 26th, right, AP?
That's right. The 26th, the last one before the dead period.
And of course, 2 more official visit weekends, tons of recruiting left this month to get into. And we'll be talking a lot more recruiting now with the unfortunate departure of Vol baseball, of course. But that's all the time we have today for this edition of the Volquest Podcast. Hey, YouTube channel, like, subscribe, go ahead and turn on the notifications. So every time we post an interview, every time we post a video, every time we post a podcast on YouTube, you will know. So go ahead and subscribe, like our YouTube page, Volquest Rivals. Just go ahead and find it there, and you won't miss out on anything. But big thanks to Smokey Mountain Organics. Visit one of the 3 locations in East Tennessee, including the one right here in Knoxville, 8018 Kingston Pike, across the street from the Trader Joe's. And you can always shop at SmokeyMountainOrganics.com. Big thanks to them. For Brent Hubbs, Rob Lewis, Austin Price, I'm Eric Cain. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to this edition of the Volquest Podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest Podcast every week here on Volquest.